You wanna hang out with me? Oh, I know. Hey everyone, how's it going? Well, it's been a couple of weeks since my last video. I ended up taking a little bit of a break last week because of, well, everything that's kind of going on in the world right now, obviously, that a lot of people are being affected by. As far as my own life goes, obviously I'm at home with my family. My wife is now working here from home as well, just like everyone else we know. Schools are closed indefinitely. I mean, they're officially closed for 3 weeks, but we suspect it's probably going to be longer than that. I would actually be surprised if our kids were back in school before the fall. It's kind of a crazy thing to think about, but may not be until the fall, or perhaps not even until after that. So I guess we're just gonna have to see how long it takes. So it looks like my my friend Luna's gonna be hanging out with us for a little bit, at least for a few minutes. So anyway, like many of you watching this video, you probably have some downtime and you're probably feeling rather anxious and concerned and trying to stay positive and stay productive. And well, at least that's how I've been feeling recently, because it's pretty clear to me I'm not going to be able to get out and do any kind of landscape photography work in the near future. It could be quite a while before I'm able to. So what I've been trying to do, instead of dwelling too much on the fact that for all intents and purposes I'm not going to be creating any new photography work for a while, I've been trying to reallocate that energy towards the photographs that I've already created, the ones that I've shot over the past couple of years. And in doing so, I have actually discovered a couple of really interesting things. One, you will undoubtedly find images that you just totally overlooked the first time you went through everything. I think what happens a lot of times is that you import a bunch of images and there's, a particular subset. There may be like, 3 or 4 or something that you're really excited about, and you allocate some time and attention towards those. And then you move on to the next set of images instead of going back and looking at the ones which, you weren't quite as excited about, but, actually have a lot of potential. But the second thing that I've noticed, and this is actually the subject of this video today, I have noticed the mistakes. And I'm not talking about mistakes like, I missed my focus, or I overexposed, underexposed, or dialed in the wrong shutter speed or something like that. But rather, I am talking about compositional mistakes, errors in judgment, moments in which I'd be out in the field and I'd be carefully composing a photograph, and I'd be trying to get the tripod to just the right position and the right height and all that kind of stuff. And then, I capture a bunch of images of it. I come back and I look at the images later and I realize that there is something off with it. There's something wrong with it. What I want to do is I want to share with you 5 mistakes that I have made over and over again over the past couple of years with my own photography. All right, let's begin with mistake number 1, converging line and color. I have made this one mistake so many times. Let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. So this is an image from Death Valley. It's not a particularly good image, to be honest. It's kind of a throwaway, but it's an excellent example of what I'm talking about with this particular mistake. So here in the foreground, you'll see there's this kind of brownish green hill here in the foreground. And then back here in the background, we have another crest. It's kind of off in the distance. The problem with this image is the fact that there is a both converging line and color happening in it. When you're out in an environment and you are viewing it with your own 2 eyes, you're looking at it with natural human vision, which is stereoscopic, you're able to more easily see and perceive the depth that is in the environment in front of you. What happens when you take a photograph, however, is that the camera doesn't see it the same way that the human eye does. The camera perceives everything as flat 2 dimensions. So all of those layers that you are seeing all of them are going to be compressed down into a flat two-dimensional plane. Then those lines are going to converge and almost like meld into one another. And that's probably not what you want, because then you're just creating almost like a blob, almost like this flat shape, which is exactly what I'm getting in this image here. Because the top of this ridge here in the foreground directly overlays with the line in the background back here. So they're just pressing right up against one another. And to make matters even worse, the color, this kind of like brownish green color here in the foreground, is repeated back here in the background. I think I have another couple of examples in here. Yeah, I mean, this is another excellent example. This is a scene out in Utah where I was photographing this rock, and you wouldn't know that the rock was a subject unto itself, because as you can see, the line around the shape of this rock directly overlays with the background back here. And again, to make matters worse, the color of this rock is nearly the same as the one that's back here in the background, which is really quite frustrating. And when I was going back through the images, I think I noticed that when I was out there, and I ended up changing my composition so that the lines wouldn't converge. But what I failed to notice, though, was the second part of this mistake, and that is the overlapping color. Because again, you can see here that the color of this rock is nearly identical to what's going on in the background. So there's no way to differentiate between the two. Okay, mistake number 2, busyness. This is another thing that is a really tricky difference, I think, between the human eye and what a camera sees. Because again, here's an image that I captured out in Utah last year. And when I captured this, I remember thinking at the moment that I had this nice leading line. Let me switch over here to the annotation tool. I had this nice leading line, kind of like leading from the lower right through the center of the photo and then up into the upper right to these hills that are up here. The thing that makes this image fail, however, for lack of a better way to putting it, is the fact that it is so terribly busy. I mean, you can see over here, there's just this whole mess of rocks here. There's rocks here. There's even a rock right here, which is directly in the middle of this, leading line that I was trying to create. And then there's a whole mess of them over here. I mean, the whole thing is just so incredibly busy. I just had way too much stuff happening in the image. And even though I have this supposed leading line that was moving the way that it was, there's too much texture. There's too many shapes. There's too many places for the eye to get hung up. There's no way that the eye can find that leading line in the image because there's so many other distracting pieces of material that are just sticking out all over the place. So I think I have another example in here of busyness. Yeah, here's another one here. So this one was shot in Lofoten, Norway. And I remember being really excited about shooting this as well because we had this nice stream of water that was moving out towards the fjord here. We had this nice tree over here. The problem though, again, is that there's just too much going on. I mean, there's just so many rocks, like, these, here and these over here. And, there's more here and then more out here. And man, I mean, you look at this and you just have no idea where you're supposed to look. It's just like your eyes, it's like a shotgun blast of content that's just coming at you in this one scene. It feels messy. It feels inconsiderate, for lack of a better word. I think when you're taking photos like this, the job is to try and reduce and simplify and try to break things down to as simple and as digestible as they can possibly be so that a viewer can understand what it is they're supposed to be looking at. And when something is just chock full of stuff, then you just end up with a mess of a photograph. And that's exactly what I have here. So I just noticed, by the way, speaking of mistakes, that I apparently have cat hair all over me, which is awesome because my cat was just up here earlier, so it's just part of the joy of owning a cat, I guess. Mistake number 3, perceiving contrast. This is a really good example of an image that I captured in Lofoten, Norway. When I was standing there and I was capturing this photo, and the thing that I was really excited about was, these peaks, obviously. I mean, back here in the background, just these beautiful mountains that were back here. Now, the thing that makes this image a particularly good example of perceiving contrast is the fact that down here in the foreground, what I failed to notice were these areas of land jutting out into the water. If you have areas like this one, which are not your intended subject, but they have the highest amount of contrast in the scene, the eye will immediately go there. So my intent with this photo was to capture the peaks across the fjord. I mean, I wanted the fjord obviously to be part of the photograph, but what I did not intend was for these areas of strong contrast down here to become the dominant force in the image. Because, I mean, really, if you were to zoom this image all the way out, all you would see would be those dark areas. And then maybe you would actually see the peaks in the back, but your eyes just latch on to that one particular spot. And that was not at all my intent with the photo. Here's another really good contrast example, this time from Iceland, with nearly the same circumstances. Back here in the back, we have this mountain range that's almost blurring together with the sky. Let me just drop the highlights so it's easier. Wow, the sky, and that's actually pretty awesome. But then jutting out right into the middle of the photograph is this just mass of black rock that's been exposed from the melting snow. And unfortunately, yet again, when you view this image from a distance and look at it, the first thing you notice is that band of black rock just sticking right out into the middle of the image, which is totally not what I was trying to capture here. Mistake number 4, insufficient breathing room. There's an old thing in photography you've probably heard of before where it's like, when you're composing a photograph, a lot of times it's not so much what you're including in your photo, but rather what you are choosing to exclude. You always want to be excluding so that you are simplifying your composition. Sometimes, however, I think that advice is bad advice. And I think what can happen though is that by attempting to simplify too much, you end up compressing your image too much, and you end up removing too much of the natural breathing room that your subject needs in order for the viewer to not feel constrained and claustrophobic within your image. This image here is such a good example of what I'm talking about. So this was captured in wintertime at Vesterhorn over in Iceland. Look at how the peak back here in the back is framed within the photo. The problem, however, is that the peak cascades down into the landscape on both the left side and the right side of it. I'm not doing a good enough job of showing how it connects with the landscape, of showing the slow kind of build up to the mountain. As a result, it feels too abrupt, like I'm cutting it off way too soon. Now, ironically, one of the ways to fix this, and I'll show you a different example here, one of the ways to fix this is to actually go in tighter, because unless a viewer is actually familiar with Vesterhorn, unless they've actually seen a photo of it before or whatever, then unless you had seen the other photograph I just showed you, you don't really notice in this one that the peaks taper off into the landscape. As far as the viewer knows, they could just keep going on and on and on. It doesn't feel like as much of a mistake. It feels like it has some intent behind it. Oh, it's so frustrating because I wish I could go back and rephotograph it, because I don't feel like I did a particularly good job of it the first time around. Okay, so I have plenty more mistakes and examples of mistakes that I could share with you, but maybe I'll make a part 2 of this video at some point. But let's end it here with number 5, horizontality. If you're not familiar with the phrase horizontal, or rather the word horizontality, horizontality is a way of describing the relationship between a subject and the horizon line in the image. If something is flat and long and has a line that is similar to the horizon, it is said to have a high degree of horizontality, which can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on how you are composing your image. And I want to show you an example of where it is absolutely not a good thing. So this is an example that I shot out at Ustad Beach in Lofoten, Norway. Crazy beach, by the way. If you've never been here or if you're not familiar with it, it is quite popular with surfers because there's some really large waves that come in here, and surfers go out there with wetsuits on in this freezing Arctic water. So it's quite a sight to see when you're out there. But the reason this image doesn't work, and let me show you here. We have this fantastic mountain range back here in the back. You have the waves and the ocean that's coming in here in the middle of the photo. And then here in the foreground is this large area of black boulders, which have all been kind of like pushed up, and they're all kind of stacked up on top of one another. And when I first got here and I arrived at this location, I was so excited by the boulders and the water and the peaks, and I wanted to get everything together, and I wanted to have the foreground and the midground and the background, and just really create this nice stacked image. And it's not a terrible photo by any means, but the weakness that it has and the reason why it doesn't work and it's not satisfying, for me at least, is the horizontality of it. Because you have this very strong, very well-defined horizontal line of where the rocks meet the water here. Then you have the horizon line right here, right? And so it's almost like you have just these slabs of subject matter, like one here, and then you have the ocean here, and then the peaks are here. And the peaks do have a little bit of at least some kind of shape in it, which is not too horizontal, not too flat. But the rest of the image is just such a problem because the horizontal line is so strong and is so long and well-defined across the frame that it just looks static. It just looks kind of dull. What I should have done was to try and find a way to connect the rocks in the foreground with the midground so that the eye had a way of moving through that foreground into the water and then hopefully up into the peaks into the back. But because that line is so rigid, the eye just gets completely blocked. And so you end up with just this long, kind of boring, static, horizontal line across the full width of the frame, which is just not particularly pleasing to the eye at all. All right, everyone, thanks so much for watching this rather painful walkthrough of my mistakes today in this video. I appreciate your time and attention. If you're into landscape photography, photography in general, product reviews, and also photo processing tutorials, I am an avid Lightroom Photoshop user, and I've been using Capture One more recently, as you can tell in this video today. So been learning a lot about Capture One, pretty exciting app. Very much enjoying it. So if these are things you are interested in, please subscribe to this channel. Also click the bell icon if you want to be notified of future videos. And that's going to do it. I hope you stay safe. I guess obviously stay indoors or 6 feet away from each other. And oh man, what a strange reality we're living in right now. I guess we'll see where we are tomorrow and in the upcoming days. I'm going to be creating more videos like this one. I'm going to be doing some product reviews. I have a couple of things that I want to be talking about. And I'm planning some other videos as well about photography composition and stuff like that. So I will see you again in the future. Thanks for being here.